My name is Professor Pier Lambiase. I'm a cardiac electrophysiology based at UCL and Bart's Heart Centre in London. And I'm going to be talking about VT mapping and newer technologies for VT ablation. Our understanding of VT mechanisms has really changed more because of our better ability to actually map ventricular tachycardia. So the principles of why VT develops and the underlying mechanisms have remained the same, but the main recognition of the fact that we are managing three-dimensional circuits and that these circuits can be certainly intramural and then arise both endocardial and epicardially has been our main advancement in actually tackling how to optimally map these circuits and also target them better for ablation. I mean, the key limitations have been the fact that often the mapping procedures themselves are quite laborious, and but with the evolution of high-density mapping catheters being able to acquire much denser maps more quickly, and also the fact that now we do what we would describe as functional substrate mapping, where we bring in sensed extra beats to change the dynamics of the myocardium and increase conduction delay, which has allowed us to identify the critical components of the circuit much more easily in sinus rhythm. And the other issue that has been improved is our ability to actually map deeper signals intramurally by removing the far-field component. And this has all come really with advances in processing of large number of electrograms and our better understanding of where these circuits actually sit. Well, they're changing really by the fact that we can remove the far-field component to see the higher frequency components of the signal, for example, using the HD grid and peak frequency analysis, and also now advances with other competing technologies, also removing the far-field component, and then with closely packed bipoles, actually see much deeper within the tissue, removing the far-field component for the sharper components of the signal, representing true myocardial channels, as it were. I mean, the evidence base from the ablation trials is still relatively limited. Different trials have used different techniques, different mapping strategies, different degrees of ablation, different degrees of inducibility of VT at the end of the procedure. Some studies have gone for ablating every possible inducible ventricular tachycardia, while others have focused more on just ablating the clinical tachycardia. And of course, the outcomes of these will vary depending upon the lab and the types of patients that are being ablated. I mean, generally speaking, the outcomes for ischemic VT ablation are much better because the substrate's more definable and the circuit's more easily mapped. For a non-ischemic cardiomyopathy, it's much more challenging because often they have multiple ventricular tachycardias, and also the substrates are often intramural and harder to actually eliminate with radiofrequency ablation. Often what we do with non-ischemic patients is if they've been having therapies from their ICD, we look at their ICD electrograms first to see if the VT's arising from the right ventricle. If they have a biventricular device, we can actually look at the left ventricular poles and see if it's more likely to be coming from near a left ventricular pole, or at least on the lateral side of the left ventricle as opposed to a right ventricular site. We can also, what we do is a non-invasive program stimulation to try and induce the VT at the beginning of the case, often with the patient awake or just partially sedated. So we can actually see a 12 lead of the ECG of the VT before we actually start the case, because often it can be quite frustrating. You may induce multiple VTs during a case, but at least if you start with something to map at the beginning, that can be of great value, particularly if the cycle length of the VT corresponds to the clinical ventricular tachycardia. Once we start the case, we'll map the substrate with functional substrate mapping. So we bring in a sensed extra after a short drivetrain of 2 or 3 beats just to bring out sites of maximum delay, because we can still see sites of maximum delay in these patients. We might see fractionated electrograms. And increasingly now we'll use the MRI scan to identify corridors and map carefully over those corridors, because we think these are the regions which are likely to support re-entry. So we might see small corridors in scar or patchy scar, which give us an indication where the VT circuit is. But often in non-ischemics, endocardially, we may see nothing at all. So we may see completely normal endocardial activation or a minimal number of corridors. So we will also map epicardially, have a low threshold to go at the beginning of the case epicardially, and map both the endocardium and the epicardium to be sure we actually see the whole substrate for VT. And that's become our upfront approach now, while in the past we would have started endocardially, we routinely go epicardially as well. I would recommend if you have the expertise, to get an MRI or CT for the scar within the tissue. And then I would definitely undertake a functional mapping approach with high density catheters to look for sites of maximum delay or sense that delayed evoked potentials, and see if you can integrate your maps. Use the MRI to guide where to map more carefully. So if you see intramural scar or epicardial scar, go immediately epicardially to map. Go where the MRI is giving you some information initially. And if you have deep septal scar, be prepared to have to ablate on both sides of the septum, or use bipolar ablation to ensure that you can actually ablate the substrate. So forewarned by imaging and then using functional substrate mapping during the case are probably the main recommendations I would make. One of the challenges in medicine, particularly, and in VT mapping, is really to declare the past, diagnose the present, and foretell the future, as Hippocrates said. And when we think about VT, often we're trying to map VT in hemodynamically compromised patients, and ideally it will be optimal if we can identify the site likely to develop re-entry when the patient's in sinus rhythm and hemodynamically stable. And we're particularly interested in conduction and repolarization. And as most of you all know very well, in order for re-entry to occur, you need a site of conduction block or delay. And if there's enough delay, then the wavefront will move around, and then the tissue recovers over a short period of time with a short repolarization time, re-entry will be initiated. So we've developed an index called the re-entry vulnerability index, where if the repolarization time is short and the activation time is long, this number is very low. And this has been used by simply mapping sites of short repolarization time and long activation time to identify likely sites of re-entry and drivers for VT. We do this with unipolar signals, and in early work, we were able to show the sites of short re-entry vulnerability index were likely to develop re-entry, could be targeted for ablation. And this is a map illustrating that, simply collected with CARTO mapping endocardially, and then illustrating sites of short repolarization time and long activation time where VT are initiated. And these regions are within 15 millimeters of the site of VT. And if we use the RVI index alone, on average, it's within 5 millimeters of the site of VT. So we're able to actually identify the site of re-entry in sinus rhythm simply with sense extra mapping in the region of interest. We actually developed this as a visual RVI index, where on the map, we have a region of short repolarization time in red on the right and long activation time on the left, which is the in purple. And the region with the short repol time is adjacent to the site of long activation time, and therefore re-entry occurred within 6 millimeters of that site. So this is a visual way of representing those activation times and repol times, but it's very challenging to do because the unipolar T wave is difficult to measure. So as we know, the VT circuit we've started to understand better now is really three-dimensional. It's often intramural, breaking out both endocardially and epicardially. And therefore, there are newer ways to actually try and find these intramural circuits. This is using the HD grid catheter with ultra high frequency, peak frequency mapping. And sites of peak frequency of more than 400 hertz are associated with much more superficial regions of the circuit. As illustrated here by Cauty, we have an intramural region, and then as the isthmus breaks out endocardially, the higher peak frequency site is identified in the more superficial fibers, which then respond to ablation with successful termination of the ventricular tachycardia. And indeed, in our own work, we've utilized the HD grid and able to demonstrate when you have intramural sites, you may be missing a component of the circuit as a gap, as what we call a near field gap within the map, or we may simply see diffuse breakout indicating an intramural site trying to break through endocardially but without a discrete origin. So we've undertaken work at Bart's Heart Center with Ed McLean, our clinical fellow, working with our imaging colleagues, Prof Peterson and Manasty, to try and understand better where these intramural circuits are arising from. And we've actually conducted an combined MRI study called the Trampoline VT study, where we used a combination of MRI maps using the ADAS software to actually look at the conduction channels within the tissue, as well as sense extra maps to bring out late potentials using a 36 electrode high density grid Optrel catheter from Biosense. And this catheter has been extremely useful because it allows us to more discreetly see an intramural site. There's much more discrete signals using these smaller bipoles. The setup we undertook was for the patients all to have an MRI scan and then to export the DICOM images into the ADAS 3D software. And then we can reconstruct the maps from the MRI maps to look at individual conduction channels. And these channels can be illustrated as we gradually slice through from endocardium to epicardium to illustrate where the circuits are likely to run with these specific corridors. We undertake functional substrate mapping with single sensed extras to bring out areas of late potentials and conduction delay. And then we're able to actually annotate the signals by removing the far field component, pick out the late potentials themselves with the sensed extras, and then overlay the map of the corridors with the electroanatomical map of the scar. Having done that, we were able to identify the intramural corridors. In this patient, for example, is mid-myocardial corridors. And when we do the sensed extra map, you'll see here the multipolar signals. There are late components in blue, and these late components actually overlap the site of the conduction channels in green. So we're able to see these intramural sites with the sensed extras corresponding to the conduction corridors. You can deliver lesions in these areas guided by the sensed extra map and the MRI ADAS map, and then illustrate how these lesions actually then obstruct the corridor. And we had very high success rate of VT termination and non-inducibility of the VT, which I'll show you in a moment. We're also able to measure the conduction velocities and demonstrate the conduction velocities are slower over myocardium where there are mid-myocardial corridors on the right. And indeed, when we look at the vectors from the Optrel catheter, we see the vectors are actually longer in regions of slow conduction over these slow conduction corridors. And indeed, you can see reproducible changes in the multipolar conduction vector as the conduction velocity changes over the region of slowest conduction. And indeed, when we deliver the lesions, we're able to show that you can actually map out where the lesion delivery is with microvascular obstruction and scarring, and that the regions of lesion delivery overlap the corridors. We can actually map the success rate of the ablation and also the number of corridors which are blocked. And actually what we see is that if you obstruct, if you are left with less than one corridor or less, you're far less likely to have a ventricular tachycardia and subsequently in these patients. But if there are two or more corridors which are left behind, then ventricular tachycardia is more likely to recur. But very high success rates if all the corridors are eliminated. And indeed, when we look at lesion depth, this is also affected by the presence of the voltage and the viable tissue. The lower the voltage, corresponding to less deep lesions because of the conductivity of the tissue due to fibrosis. So in conclusion, MRI with 3D scar segmentation, it's possible in 18 patients to actually conduct a study, identify the corridors, and demonstrate with single sense extra maps sites of maximal conduction delay corresponding to the mid-myocardial substrate and the corridors, and therefore combining imaging and mapping to target ablation in these patients. So the question really is, can we do this in an integrated way? And certainly with the INNO trial, this is a trial using CT mapping to identify the intramural corridors or the endocardial corridors in patients post-myocardial infarction, undertaking a purely imaging-guided approach. About 10% of these patients still needed VT induction and electrophysiological mapping. And so this really raises the question that EP certainly is here to stay, and whether we can actually integrate this with our imaging technologies for the best outcomes for our patients, for the simplest, shortest procedures possible. Thank you for your attention.